Welcome in, and you are sitting courtside with Karli Bell. I apologize for this being a day late. I logged onto my computer on Sunday and it started overheating, and no matter what I did, it just didn't want to open up the software. It didn't want to get things done. So I needed to let it just have a moment. I think the heat, if anyone here in Chicago has been around the city, we've experienced a lovely 90-degree some odd heat wave that we've had here. And I think my computer's like, you know what? I'm going to get hot too. So apologies that this is coming out a day late. Hopefully, knock on wood, won't happen again. And for those of you that are watching, we're in a new place. We're in new digs for the time being. Hopefully it's just temporary and we'll see what happens here, moving forward. But speaking of moving forward, there's a lot of things happening within the WNBA space. Last time I spoke to y'all, we were heading into the WNBA trade deadline, and now that trade deadline has passed. And there was really only one trade that happened, which was basically a trading of rookies in between the Connecticut Sun and the Washington Mystics, in trading JC Sheldon and Aaliyah Edwards. And then there was some draft stuff thrown in there as well. And then we also saw the Alicia Clark trade happen between Seattle and Washington, with Washington sending Brittany Sykes to Seattle and Washington getting Alicia Clark in return. And there's also draft capital thrown in there as well. So that was really about it. The WNBA trade deadline, I will say, has picked up a lot more in recent years than what we've seen in the past. A lot of that is due to, we're seeing more, I feel like competitiveness is not the right word, but that's kind of the only thing that I can use to describe this right now, which is you're seeing teams wanting to make the moves now. And this is where I believe that when 2026 comes around and the CBA negotiation happens and all that jazz, I think because if they argue for more roster spots, you're going to see more trades become more likely heading into the trade deadline, prior to the trade deadline, all that. I think it's something that will become more prevalent as the WNBA continues to expand. And I also think with the added teams that they're getting in 2026, 27, 28, and moving forward, I think will also help encourage the trade deadline, trading assets, trading players, and draft capital there. There were some teams that did not partake, Chicago Sky being one of them, Los Angeles Sparks, Golden State Valkyries, Indiana Fever, and the Phoenix Mercury. I know some people will say DeWanna Bonner, but it technically wasn't. And the New York Liberty. And then again, they just added Emma Mieseman. They didn't make a trade for anybody. And then Minnesota Lynx is just picking up New York Liberty players and players like Infinity Stones right now. You get to Dejanay Carrington, who's come in through a trade with the Dallas Wings, and then Jalen Sherrod gets waived by New York, and Minnesota's like, I'm picking them. Cheryl Reeve, man, that team is just playing with vengeance. They're playing with a new fire, a new energy. And I know I sound incredibly repetitive because I've said it almost every single week, but it's true. Look at what they're doing. Like it's just, they are so salty. They are so angry. They're so pissed off at how the end of 2024 went for them, that they are doing everything in their power to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Obviously, some teams are going to have good days, some teams are going to have better nights, all that stuff, but they're the only team that isn't in double-digit losses. And there's give or take, like 12, 13 games left. So this is going to be really interesting. And right now, I'm going to go through the rankings because there are some teams that need to watch how other teams fare because there's such a close race in the bottom of the playoff pack. So let's go through it. Number one, obviously the Minnesota Lynx. Number two is the New York Liberty. Again, I just think that's going to be what it is. However, I think New York is on a little bit of a downward spiral. I'm not going to say they're collapsing. I think they're going through a lot of adversity right now, and they're trying to navigate and figure out how to push through. They're going to make the playoffs. It's about how they can make sure they don't get upset in the playoffs. That's the biggest thing for New York to figure out right now. After New York, at number three is the Atlanta Dream, who has just really done a phenomenal job this year. Carl Schmesko has really done incredible work with the team that he has and with what he was able to build. I think he's doing a really great job. I think there is an opportunity that you might see Atlanta sneak into the 2 spot if New York continues to have some issues here. At 4 is Phoenix. I think Phoenix is really pushing. I think 2, 3, and 4. I said it last week that I think 3 and 4 are going to flip. I think just because of how New York is playing right now and they just look a little discombobulated, I think you're going to see some shakeups in 2, 3, and 4. As in Atlanta might be the 2, Phoenix might be the 3, New York might be the 4, or Phoenix might push up to the 2, and then New York at the 3 and Atlanta at the 4. I think those 3 teams are going to bounce around here for the last few weeks. And number 5 is the Indiana Fever. And man, God, poor Indiana. Right now, I just want to say this right now. Ari McDonald and Sydney Colson, I send all my love and prayers out to you guys, to both of you, because season-ending injuries for the both of them. And that is, especially that Sydney Colson injury, that's a hard one to watch. It didn't look good. And I know the commissioner and Kathy Engelbert has said that we haven't really seen anything in injuries. We've seen more season-ending injuries this year than we have in years past. I think there needs to be conversations, and I'll get into this in a little bit when we start talking about looking towards the future. But I think Indiana now is in a spot because they just don't have any guards. They did just sign Odyssey Sims on a hardship contract, but they just don't have any guards, and there's no real timetable on when Caitlin Clark will come back. So Lexi Hall and Sophie Cunningham are going to pick, and obviously Kelsey Mitchell. That's their guard group. Like, that's not a lot of depth, and you need more depth than that in your guard group, especially when you don't really have a true point guard. So they sign Odyssey Sims to come in and be kind of the leader for them offensively. And I think that's a great fit for Indiana because Indiana likes to play with pace. They like to really play that transitional style of basketball, and that's what Odyssey Sims thrives in, is transitional basketball. I think it was a really good pickup for them as they try and make this playoff push here at the end. But because they are dealing with a lot of injuries here at the end of the season, I think we could see some shakeups here at the bottom of the pack. And I think Indiana, depending on how they fare, if you look at their schedule, Indiana's next 3 games are against easy opponents. They play Dallas Wings, and then they play the Washington Mystics, and then they play the Connecticut Sun. I think now for them to go through those injuries with those 3 games on the horizon is something that is a blessing for the Indiana Fever. They have the ability to kind of let Odyssey find her fitting. And I think regardless of whether or not they did sign Odyssey Sims and they were dealing with these issues with the injuries, they would win all 3 of these games, especially because Washington is really, and they said it from the beginning, that they are wanting to rebuild. They're not wanting to make a run for a championship. I don't think they're trying to be in the playoffs. I think when you send away Brittany Sykes, who's having a career year and is having one of the best seasons, you're seeing that happen, and you're seeing them just want to collect draft picks. I don't think they're a team that, I'm not going to say they're not going to be competitive, because I think that is disrespectful, but I think because they're really looking towards building towards the future and wanting to capitalize that way, you're not going to see Washington be as close as they were when they had Brittany Sykes on the team in games. And I think it's going to lead to some more blowouts that could be possible. And Washington right now, if we look at the standings, is out of the playoffs. And I think that will stay in the picture. So I think Indiana, dealing with the injuries that they have right now, you have kind of the best 3 games, and there's never a good time to deal with injuries, but you have the best 3 games coming up where you can deal with it, assess it, and let Odyssey find some footing. I do think, though, after that, it really kind of depends on how the other teams below them in standings do. And right behind them is the Las Vegas Aces. They both have the same record, 18 and 14, at this moment as I'm recording on Monday, August 11th. So I think Las Vegas could sneak up into a 5 seed, because I think Las Vegas, with them moving Jewel Lloyd to the bench and having her come off the bench and finding some rhythm and finding some things there, it's working well for them. And you also have Asia Wilson, and Asia Wilson's just Asia Wilson. There's no other way to put that. She is an incredible talent. She's an incredible feat. She's an unbelievable player, and you can't underestimate any team that has Asia Wilson. You just can't. And you also have Chelsea Gray on there. You have Jackie Young. You still have a good core there that can do a lot of incredible things. So, and I also think Dana Evans has done really well under Becky Hammon in Las Vegas. I think Becky found the right way to utilize her and utilize her skill set as a bench piece in her coming off the bench. She's very much still a traditional shooting guard in how she plays. She's also more defensive minded with her energy that she has. And I think that is a great 1-2 punch to pair with Jewell Loyd, because Jewell Loyd is so offensive minded. She is the leader. She is somebody that can be the facilitator. And then you have Dana Evans there on the 2 to help be that 3-point threat when needed. Jewell Loyd can obviously also shoot the 3 along with who else they have, but I think that 1-2 punch there works well for Las Vegas, and I think Las Vegas is starting to play good basketball at the right time. At number 7 is the Golden State Valkyries. I'm going to just say this, regardless of whether or not they make the playoffs, they've had an incredible season. Natalie Nakase, I'm going to say this, when she was here in Chicago, I finally got to talk to her and meet her and have some conversations with her. And she is incredible. I've been in this space now for a little bit, and I've talked to some coaches where you sit there and you're like, I'll run through a brick wall for you, and I'm just a media person. Natalie is one of those people. Coach Nakase is one of those people. She got me excited. You can tell the respect that she has for her players, the communication that she has with her players, the ferocity and the tenacity that she has is shown in a way that's not rah, 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 rah. It's more sternness and strength, which I really love. And when asked about, what she wants to see in this first year, she's obviously, they're like, we want to win and we want to win now. And that's coming from the top down. And that's a great thing to hear, is that this is a team, even in an expansion year, that wants to still have some fun and play some upsets and possibly make this playoff push. I think they could do that. So they play the Connecticut Sun, the Washington Mystics, and then the Chicago Sky. So again, 3 games that could be very winnable for the Golden State Valkyries, that could allow them to stay in the playoff hunt, very much so. And I think that that's something to keep an eye on, because they kind of have, again, just how Indiana is dealing with 3 easy games here while they navigate injuries, Golden State has an opportunity to better their record to stay in the conversation among the playoff teams. However, I think we're still going to see this battle at 7, 8, and 9. I think 5 and 6 are kind of locked. Whether or not Indiana stays at the 5 and Las Vegas at the 6, I think that's the actual question that we need to see happen here in this last bit of the season, with about only 12 to 14 games left, depending on the team. While I think Golden State does have the opportunity to stay in the playoff race, I do think that they could play upset. And I think that they could knock off a couple teams, if they do get up there in seedings, where they could possibly knock off maybe a Phoenix or an Atlanta. I think that's possible. Dependent on health, obviously, there's so many games left, anything can happen. And I think Golden State is a team to keep an eye on, for sure. And then at the 8th seed is the Seattle Storm. I'm going to say this, in my preseason projections, I did have Seattle making the playoffs, but I still believe that Seattle is dealing with a lot of issues. There's something going on in Seattle. I don't know what it is, but we've seen this happen time and time again, where they play really great basketball for a really great stretch, and then they hit a losing skid at the worst time of the season, to where they kind of need to claw their way back, while other teams are starting to peak right when they're starting to go through their struggles. And we've seen that a lot just with Seattle here in I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, where you see them at the beginning of the season and they're gelling and they're clicking and they're moving and there's this and there's that and the offense and but then like end of July, beginning of August comes around, and for whatever reason, they don't tank, but like they really take a nosedive in their production, in their movement, and what they're able to do defensively. And that's kind of what we've seen here with the Seattle Storm over these last few games. Over the last 5 games, they are on a 5-game losing streak. And out of their last 10, they're 3 and 7. So they're not playing the best basketball at a time that's really impactful, especially when you're fighting now for this last playoff spot between 7 and 8. That's why I really do believe that the Los Angeles Sparks could absolutely make a push here. Of their last 10 games, they're 8 and 2. So I think LA is really doing some great things right now. I think with who LA has here near the end of their schedule, they do play the New York Liberty, which is going to be a tough battle. But I think with them having Cameron Brink back and having her navigate and get back into the offense, I think one that allows front court depth for the Sparks that they haven't had. They had, but now you have that core piece that you want to build around. And then you're also seeing her work with Kelsey Plum, and I think that's going to be a great thing. But after New York, they play the Dallas Wings, and then they play the Washington Mystics, and then the Dallas Wings again. So again, LA is kind of in a spot where they have a relatively winnable schedule here. That's only just these next 4 games where things can be impactful. And who did LA just beat on Sunday? They beat the Seattle Storm. So if it does come down to right at the very end where things are working out here and who's got this record and who's got this, I think there is a very high chance that LA could sneak into the playoffs. I think that's something that could be very possible, because I think Seattle is in a weird spot where it's going to be difficult for them. And if you look at who Seattle has upcoming, I mean, they have a tough schedule. They have some time off, and then they play Atlanta back to back, and then they play Phoenix. That's their next 3 games, and then they play the Chicago Sky. So I think it's very possible that it could turn into an 8-game losing streak. And then you're in a spot where LA has a relatively easy schedule. You're dealing with the difficult schedule. LA could sneak up into that 8 spot, and then Seattle falls. So I think that 7 and 8, depending on how Golden State does here, yes, these next 3 games for them are very easy. But after that, what's going to happen? I don't know. So that's why these next few weeks are going to be really entertaining. We don't really know what's going to happen. And you're also dealing with some teams that are dealing with a lot of bad injuries right now that they're trying to navigate. And you're also dealing with teams that are starting to have their injury bug lifted. You're starting to see more players become available and come back for them. So it's something there that I think it's really 1 through 9 right now. Obviously, it's only the top 8 teams that make it, but I do believe the top 9 teams right now are the ones in playoff contention. At a 10 is the Washington Mystics, who we've just really seen here. I think I'm not going to say they're tanking. I don't think that's what it is. I think they're still going to be competitive, but they're not aiming to make the playoffs right now. And then at 11 is the Chicago Sky, at 12 is the Dallas Wings, and 13 is Connecticut. I think those 3 teams right now, I know Chicago won't admit it, but I think all 3 of those teams understand that their seasons are not projecting to make playoffs. That's just not going to be I think Connecticut's fully accepted that. And I also think Dallas has accepted it, because you saw them trade away Dejanay. You saw them trade away Nalissa. And you saw them get rid of pieces that they brought in. Didn't work, so they let them go, and let them go to teams that have the ability to make a playoff push. And so Connecticut, I think, with a lot of things going on over there, with a selling of the team, with a new head coach coming in, and also trying to build what they can build with Anissa Mora and Sanaya Rivers and a few others that they want to bring in there. I think Connecticut's in a spot where you might see some interesting things happen here in the offseason. Dallas also in a spot where they're like, you know what? We're not making playoffs. It is what it is. Let's just stay competitive and let's play day to day. And that's the same thing that the Chicago Sky are preaching, is we want to stay competitive day to day, and we want to see things going day to day. And before we get into the Chicago Sky, which will not be a very long conversation, make sure you follow us at Courtside KB on all platforms. You check out our website, courtsidewithkarlibell.com, or we will have some playoff projections after this week as we looked for the last 10 games and what we think will happen, who the seedings will be, and all of that. And then on top of that, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And before you say anything, yes, I know I got sunburned this weekend. Okay. I was at the Bears game on Sunday, and I was also at the lake on Saturday, and you guys don't want to know what the rest of my body looks like right now. I am red. I am so red. I got terrible sunburn, and the burns were almost as bad as what the Chicago Sky are going through right now. You know, this is a season that, and I said it on a podcast this week that I was on, Full Court Trio, phenomenal group of people to chat with, and they have some really great, I had a fun time just kind of chatting hoops, answering questions, and talking with people over there. So by all means, go give them a listen. So the Chicago Sky, you know, I sound really repetitive at this point, and I know everyone kind of comes to me for Chicago Sky stuff, because that's where I'm at. That's where I'm located, and that's who I talk about year in and year out. And I think at this point, I'm not going to say the season's over, because it's not September and the season's not over, but I think it's at a point now where what you want to do is you want to stay competitive and see if you can pull off some wins over teams. Like, you're playing Seattle. If you look at who Chicago has left for the end of the season, you're playing Seattle. Well, you have Connecticut on Wednesday, which I think should be a good morale boost for Chicago if they're able to pull out that win. After that, you have Golden State, Seattle, New York. I don't think you're going to get a win over New York. I just think, prove me wrong. Don't think Chicago's getting a win over New York. But you want to know who you could upset is either Golden State or Seattle. And I think that's kind of what Chicago needs to play as right now, which is we want to stay competitive, and we've dealt with a lot of adversity. We've dealt with tons of injuries, including a injury at the start of the season that really killed them completely. In all honesty, and I know fans don't like hearing that. They're like, Courtney Vandersloot wasn't impactful in the time that she was there. She played 7 games, y'all. I don't think you can evaluate a team based on the first 7 games. You can evaluate it on the first 10. And if you were watching, you saw in those last 2 to 3 games right before her injury, they were getting things moving, and there was some growth there in the system. And then you lose the person that's going to run your offense. And not only that, somebody who is the full identity of the team, because she was, and they talked about it from day one, how impactful Courtney Vandersloot was going to be for this team. And when you lose that, it's really hard to come back from. It just is. And then on top of that, you lose Ariel Atkins for an extended period of time because of a leg injury, and she's on a minutes restriction. And in the minutes she's playing, she is doing well, averaging between 8 to 12 points a game, putting up 2 to 4 assists, a couple steals in there in 25 minutes. That's all you want out of her right now. And then Angel Reese is still dealing with a back injury, and she has not come back to Chicago. And I know a lot of fans are like, what's going on with the back injury? I don't know. All we get told is that she's day to day. That's it. We don't know what the actual injury is. We don't know anything beyond that she is day to day. That's it. And I wish I could give you more information, but I'm telling you the information that they tell us. And this is something that this is not just with the Chicago Sky. There's also some other teams that have done this in the past too. I want more transparency about injuries, because then I have to continue to ask about it when you're not giving me an update on a timetable. You want to know why they haven't asked Stephanie White about Caitlin Clark? Is because they said there's really no definite timetable on when we're going to bring her back. We don't know. We have to feel it out. We have to figure it out. And that's not what I'm getting from Chicago. Same thing when they ask Cameron, they're like, what's kind of the timetable for Cameron Brink? They're like, she's going to aim for end of June. And then they ask them again in June, and they're like, you know what? We're going to wait till after the All-Star break. I want more transparency with injuries. And I also believe that there needs to be, and that I don't think that's just a team thing. I think that needs to come from the league. There needs to be a lot more transparency around injuries. You don't need to reveal everything, but you can just say for example, with Ariel Atkins, they said it was a leg injury and she ended up being out for 2 weeks. You could just say she's out for 2 weeks. But if you're saying they're like, no, it's day to day, it's still how she feels, but you're sitting there and you're like, you have 3 games you had 4 games in 6 days, and you're probably not going to see her a lot in that time period. Just say you might not see her for the first half of the week. We're going to aim to bring her back at the end of the week. Transparency with injuries is something that I want to see more out of as the league continues to grow, because one, I think it gets fans off of teams' backs. It gets us reporters off of teams' backs, and it allows them to just focus on the rehab. And now if I'm Chicago Sky at this point, Angel Reese dealing with a back injury, a game now that the Sky have rest and they don't have to force anything, you hope that she can come back for the Connecticut game. If not, you aim for the Valkyries game. And then I think after that, if there's no real timetable on her coming back, I think there needs to be a conversation about shutting her down for the season, because the playoffs are not something that's going to be happening. If you look from a record standpoint, right now you are 6 games behind the team in 10th place just from a record standpoint. And the Sky actually have the hardest strength of schedule to end the season. So you sit there and you're like, do you shut her down and you just hope for her to get healthy? Because a back injury, as someone who suffered a back injury, that ended my playing career completely, it is something you don't mess around with. Back injuries can be lifelong problems if not taken care of properly. I had to go through years of rehab to fix my back. Years. It is, and I know I'm going to have to deal with the surgery later on. And I'm hoping, knock on wood, that all of the rehab, all of the stretching, all of the work that I've put in over the last decade and keeping it healthy and stretching it, making sure I don't injure it, making sure I don't pull it in certain ways, is going to prevent that injury, because my issue was muscular. It wasn't something dealing with bones. Mine is all muscle, which is honestly harder to deal with because it's something that you're just dealing with tightness. You don't know if you're going to be okay that day. You could bend down, pick something up, and then it flares up. I've had that happen. I've injured my back going to grab something from behind me, and then I'm out for 4 days. It's something that you cannot mess with. You have to take care of it properly. And if you're sitting there and you're like, we don't know what this timetable is. And I'm also going to say this. I think Angel Reese is somebody who wants to come back. She's somebody that doesn't, and she has that dog mentality. And that's why her and Ariel work really well together. They both just truly love the game of basketball and are really obsessed with the game of basketball to where that's what they want to do. And Angel's in a spot where I know it's probably her going, I don't want to be shut down. I want to really rehab this and see if I can come back and be a factor for my team. I think that's a huge thing that's playing right now. But you also have to sit there and go, okay, we're not making playoffs. Why risk greater injury? And I think you let this week happen, maybe into next week, you see if she comes back. If she comes back within the next 10 days, I think that's fine. But if she doesn't, then you sit there and you go, all right, maybe you need to shut her down. And you need to just go, you know what? We appreciate everything you've done for us this season, but for your own health and safety and your own rehab, you need to sit out the rest of the year and rehab it so that when Unrivaled comes around, you're able to work on things on Unrivaled, you're playing an Unrivaled, you get your rest after Unrivaled, and then you come back to the W in 2026. So I think that's very possible. Do I think that that's going to happen? I don't know, because we don't really know what is going on and we don't know the length of the injury. So I think it's something that you need to consider, because you're going to have her and Camilla. And so who you have going into 2026, Sky fans, is only on contract. This is the only people you have on contract is Haley Van Lith, Maddie Westbeld, Angel Reese, Camila Cardoso, Aisha Sioka, which I know everyone's saying Sivka. Her name is Aisha Sioka. That's how you say her name. And then Aisha Koulibaly. That's it. That's it. That's all you have on contract. And these are if this is who you're going to build around, you see what happens. And a lot of people are like, Chicago Sky don't have a draft pick in 2026. They do. They have a first round draft pick. You just don't know what that first round draft pick is. You technically have Connecticut's pick. And Connecticut, depending on what happens right now, you're probably going to get the fifth pick, fourth through sixth, somewhere in there, but you don't know what's going to happen because nobody knows what the expansion draft rules are going to be like. Nobody knows what any of that issue is going to be. So there's a lot of things there, and there is a possibility that you could see some moves to get some draft capital back. I think that's a huge thing. I think there could be some things where people sign people and you see free agent trades. I think that's a huge thing that could happen in 2026, dependent on when stuff gets signed. So I know everyone wants me to project beyond this year. I can't. I truly can't, because I don't know what the expansion rules are going to be like. I don't know what free agency rules are going to be like. I don't know what the salary cap situation is going to be, because if the salary cap is going to get boosted, then you're going to see a lot of players only really go to 4 or 5 teams, which is going to be take out the expansion teams. I'm not including the expansion teams. The teams that you're going to see a lot of free agents go to is going to be Golden State, Las Vegas, New York, Minnesota, and then either LA or Seattle, because they're the ones with all the resources. They're the ones with all the money. They're the ones with all the capital. They're the ones with the treatment of players that want it. I think Atlanta is a team that deserves to have a bigger stadium than what they have. Only seating 3,000 is insane, and I personally hate the black court. Don't like it. I think Connecticut's in a weird spot because they're in a process of selling a team that I think it's more so going to be what we saw this past year with what free agency was like, which is they're going to pick up the players that don't go places. I think Chicago's in that conversation. I think Washington is in a conversation where they're maybe only going to get a couple veterans because they really want to build in the draft. And then beyond that, you're going to see people kind of spread. Indiana's going to have some good people return because Indiana's a good team and people want to go play with Caitlin. People want to go play with, if Kelsey Mitchell does return there, Kelsey Mitchell. You don't know Leah Boston as well. You have good players there that people want to go play with. People want to play here with Angel and Camilla, but there's also conversations around the Chicago Sky ownership, which is something that you can't fight. Same thing with Connecticut. Can't fight it. Same thing with some other teams. You can't fight it because it's just the truth. There's only so much that you can control. So we'll see what happens here in 2026. I don't know what's going to happen in 2026. I think what you saw this year is a glimpse of what next year will be. I think the teams that are going to see full implosions of their roster, I think would be Dallas. I would say Connecticut. I would say Chicago. I would also say Seattle. I would also say, I'd say about that. Washington's not really going to blow up their roster because they're adding so much in draft capital. They're more so building their roster. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. 2026 is going to be really, really incredible. And for those that are asking, Karli, you don't really talk about Sky anymore. And I'm like, 'cause they're bad. I don't want to talk about a bad team. I don't like talking about a bad team. I really don't. It's not enjoyable to talk about a bad team. So what we're going to see here, as the season winds down, is it's going to be a lot more talk about the rest of the WNBA. I'm going to try and get some other reporters and writers on that cover the rest of the league, see if we can get some conversations going about what they expect to see out of the last bit of the WNBA season here. And then when the playoffs come around, it's going to be all talk of playoffs, looking ahead at the brackets, looking ahead at the schedules, looking at predictions and projections and what we think awards are going to be. I'm going to start having those conversations here in a little bit. But expect this to really become more WNBA centric moving forward. We'll talk Chicago Sky here and there, but I can only repeat myself for so long. They have stagnant offensive movement. The turnovers are still an issue. They don't really have a true point guard. They're struggling with injuries. And on top of that, they have no defensive identity. I can only say that for so many weeks. I can only say that so much. I'm really sick and tired of repeating myself. There's one thing I hate more than anything else, which is repeating myself. We're going to start talking about some other teams here soon. So that's all I have here on this week's episode of Courtside with Karli Bell. Again, make sure you follow us on all platforms at Courtside KB. That's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads. Make sure you follow us on our YouTube. That's like, comment, and subscribe there. If you're listening to us, follow us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple. We're on all platforms. And make sure you check out our website, courtsidewithkarlibell.com. There's a lot of things coming here. I'm going to start putting out some more WNBA projections and things like that as the weeks continue. But that's all I have here, and I'll catch you next time on the sidelines.